Hi guys, welcome back to another video. It's been a couple days here since we've gotten a real update on the Xbox Activision Blizzard acquisition. We got the big news last week, and since then it's been pretty quiet. And that news was that the CMA had essentially rescinded their issues with the console market in terms of thinking that Xbox could partially or fully foreclose PlayStation. The console harm theory was debunked, and they say Xbox has absolutely zero incentive business wise to actually do anything in terms of trying to foreclose PlayStation or taking Call of Duty off of the PlayStation platform, as they would just lose way too much money. It doesn't make any sense. So that was a big win for Xbox last week, but we haven't really heard anything updating the deal up until right now. Now, this article here specifically isn't about Activision Blizzard, but it is about Google complaining about Microsoft's cloud practices, which to the EU, they'll obviously look at that and then take into account the cloud practices for the Activision Blizzard acquisition. We actually have some tweets from Idosloth and IDAS's updates from the MLX database, which we will go over later on in the video. So it's some interesting stuff to keep in mind as this deal goes forward. We know that there are three things that are being looked at. There is the console theory, which now has been debunked. Then there is the cloud theory and how maybe Microsoft is going to be able to use this deal to foreclose competitors, and it's going to be anti-competitive because of how big Call of Duty and how big Activision Blizzard is. And then there is the third thing they're looking at, which is how are the promises and remedies that Microsoft is offering here, how are those going to be enforced? But this one specifically is focusing on the cloud practices. So we'll go through this article. It says here that Alphabet, so that's Google, Cloud has accused Microsoft of anti-competitive cloud computing practices and criticized imminent deals with several European cloud vendors, saying these do not solve broader concerns about its licensing terms. In Google's Cloud's first public comments on Microsoft and its European deals, its vice president Amit Zavery told Reuters that the company has raised the issue with antitrust agencies and urged European Union antitrust regulators to take a closer look. In response, Microsoft referred to a blog post in May last year, where its president Brad Smith said it has a healthy number 2 position when it comes to cloud services, with just over 20% market share of global cloud service revenues. And this is the blog post he is referring to. If you remember, they put out some of these posts here as this deal was going through to try to kind of make people feel better about the remedies and make them feel better that they aren't going to try to go ahead and foreclose and show people their actual place in the market compared to their perceived place in the overall market. And that's what that blog post goes over if you want to go ahead and read that. Now, Microsoft spokesperson says this: "We are committed to the European cloud community and their success. There is intense rivalry between the two U.S. tech giants and the fast-growing multi-billion-dollar cloud computing business, where Google trails market leader Amazon and Microsoft. They say here the sector has recently drawn greater regulatory scrutiny, including the United States and Britain, because of the dominance of a few players and its increasingly critical role as more and more companies shift their services to cloud." Now, obviously, cloud would be a massive thing if this deal does go through in terms of providing these games via cloud services. And we've also already seen Microsoft offer the licensing terms of all of these games to multiple different cloud providers like Boosteroid and Ubitus, a royalty-free worldwide license as well. So it is really a win-win, especially for these smaller companies out there, that knowing that their customers may own some of these Activision Blizzard games, specifically Call of Duty, and now they're still going to be able to play it through their cloud service. They won't be held back if they decide to go and buy Call of Duty on Steam and they want to go play it via the Boosteroid streaming service, because these are all bring your own game services. And it's a smart business move by Microsoft, because they're still going to be making money off of people still purchasing these games, knowing that they can stream them via the platform of their choice. And Google here is making the argument that these licensing agreements, these licensing terms, are going to make it anti-competitive and that it needs to be looked into further. It continues here and says, "The sector has recently drawn greater regulatory scrutiny, including the United States and Britain, because of the dominance of a few players and its increasingly critical role as more and more companies shift their services to the cloud. Microsoft has offered change its cloud computing practices in a deal with a few smaller rivals, which in turn will suspend their antitrust complaints. A person with direct knowledge of the matter told Reuters this week. The move will stave off an EU investigation." And here's the quote here from Amit Zavery saying, "Microsoft definitely has a very anti-competitive posture in cloud. They are leveraging a lot of their dominance in the on-premise business as well as Office 365 and Windows to tie Azure and the rest of cloud services and make it hard for customers to have choice. When we talk to a lot of our customers, they find a lot of these bundling practices as well as the way that they are creating pricing and licensing restrictions make it difficult for them to choose other providers. Xavier said individual deals struck with several smaller European cloud vendors only benefit Microsoft. They're selectively kind of buying out those ones who complain and not make those terms available to everyone. So that definitely makes it an unfair advantage to Microsoft and ties the people who complain back to Microsoft. Anyway, whatever they're offering, there should be terms across for everybody, not just one or two they've chosen and pick. And that shows you that they have so much market power, they can kind of go and do those things individually. My point to the regulators would be they should look at this holistically. Even though one or two vendors might settle, doesn't solve the broader problem. And that's the problem we need to really resolve, not individual vendor problems. And now the European Union has decided to not comment on any of this. And we know that they are going through another EU antitrust complaint from CISPE, who they say here are members include Amazon. Obviously, Amazon and Google are going to be their biggest competitors when it comes to the cloud and when it comes to these other huge tech companies. And it says that Xavier dismissed the suggestion that the issue is merely a spat between Google and Microsoft, and the question is not about Google. I just want to make it very clear it's the cloud. The premise with cloud was to have an open, flexible way to deploy your software and have give customers more choices so that they can run their software in any place they choose to in a much more easy way. So this is a big complaint here. Google is complaining to the EU about Microsoft's cloud practices and how they are anti-competitive, and this can easily tie into the Xbox Activision Blizzard acquisition, as that is one of the main complaints that the CMA and the EU were looking into, asking Microsoft to make remedies for. How are they going to not utilize their huge power in the cloud with gaming to foreclose competition? And one of the ways they're doing it here is with the licensing, the 10-year deals. And now Google is saying that the deals and licensing that they make are essentially just showing how much power Microsoft has by being able to handpick and select who they can buy out in order to kind of make these regulators feel okay about these deals that they are making. And we have this tweet here that says Microsoft's remedies to address EU competition concerns have received broadly positive feedback. So overall, the EU is looking at what Microsoft has made in terms of the remedies and are, happy with them going forward. And they're going to do all their tests and see whether these are things that will be okay for the industry. Will it make it anti-competitive or not? It says here, the European Game Developer Federation was generally pleased with the remedy offered. Sony and Google have criticized the remedies proposed by Microsoft. And this is a update summary from IDAS, who again went through that MLEX database and summarized it all for us. It says Microsoft's remedies to address EU competition concerns have received broadly positive feedback from the associations representing video game developers in Europe. The European Games Developer Federation was generally pleased with the remedy offer, but it has encouraged the Commission to further investigate how they would work in the future when the cross-platform distribution of games become more common. Sony and Google have criticized remedies proposed by Microsoft. And that's it right there. Those are their two big, anti-competitive people that they have to deal with, that they are going to go complain about all the anti-competitive practices that could potentially come out of this deal, because they know that this deal is going to bolster Microsoft. It's going to bolster the Xbox division and make it harder and harder for them to have huge dominance in those specific industries. One of the things Google is also probably thinking about with this is the mobile side of things. Microsoft has made it abundantly clear that this deal is for mobile. And if this deal goes through, they may have that opportunity to actually compete with the Google Play Store, which would be something that Google definitely does not want to happen. We talk about competition here. We talk about being anti-competitive. One of the main things that is probably the driving force behind a lot of these complaints for these companies is they don't want competition. That's the truth of the matter. They just want to continuously be dominant. They don't want a big player, trillion-dollar company like Microsoft coming in and having to push them to compete even harder. They're happy with where they are currently, but really only having to deal with one other company. I mean, you think about PlayStation specifically, at least in Japan, they really only have to deal with Nintendo, and they make a ton of money there. And all around the world, in terms of the console, PlayStation, their main competitor right now in terms of sales and all that type of stuff, you could say, is the Nintendo Switch, who has just a much bigger force in the console market. Whereas Xbox, because they don't compete as well in every region of the world, they do well in the West, but because they don't compete as well in like Japan stuff, PlayStation doesn't need to worry about them as much, I don't believe. Then you think about Google, really all they're competing with right now is Apple in terms of the mobile gaming side and the mobile store. So they don't want another player coming in here disrupting that and then splitting up the market even more, taking more market share away from them, and them not making as much money. But this, again, a very interesting report here, because yes, it's not specifically here talking about the Xbox Activision Blizzard acquisition in this Reuters report, but obviously when it comes to the cloud and anti-competitive practices, Google wants to push back against anything that Microsoft is doing here. And the cloud is going to play a major role in how the EU looks at the overall structuring of this deal, the overall remedies of this deal. Like, the CMA has come out, they've said there's no substantial lessening of competition on the console market. I think that them looking at the cloud is going to be one of the bigger things. What's the decision for that? And are they going to accept the remedies that Microsoft has offered? But I'll leave that there, guys. If you enjoyed this video, hit that thumbs up. If you're new here, hit that subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.
Bye.